Well, happy Saturday, folks. It's the real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here in downtown Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And actually, if you look at the sunrise here earlier this morning, we had, you see blue sky. Again, we've had a lot of smoke, as most of the U.S. has had here with the Canadian Northwest fires. And blue skies, low humidity, a nice day here. Again, you can see the jet stream has pushed south of us, so a little cooler and less humid here. We'll take it. Looking at El Nino here, it's definitely strengthening here. You can see that really warm water off the equatorial Pacific there, replacing the 3-year La Nina cycle. So much, much warmer water. Models right here show that, pick your model, but basically they all suggest it's going to peak probably here sometime in the early fall time frame, October, and then it looks like a pretty rapid weakening. We'll see about that. It'd be a little unusual to get that strong, and definitely be a strong El Nino, and then to get that weak that quickly. This plays a role for our winter forecast. You can see these really warm waters too off the East Coast, very, very warm. So El Nino, really warm waters off the East Coast. That's a classic nor'easter pattern for this winter. So if you don't like big nor'easter potential snowstorms, we could be talking about that pretty much all winter long, especially January looks to be epic. So that's all we have to say about that for now. Looking at the U.S. drought situation, made some improvement here. We'll see, we might go the other way here. But right now we're 49% of the country in dry to drought phases. Versus last year at 69%. So last year was the second most in decades. So again, some improvement. Still dry there in Missouri and Kansas, making some improvement, but in the Corn Belt from Illinois and points east. But again, very dry and parts of in the Corn Belt here in the plains. But the rest of the country not doing too bad. Again, about average is what we'd expect for around 18 July. If we look at last week here on the world scale here, week ending here today, 22nd, here in the U.S., about 2.5 degrees cooler than last year. Still 11th warmest in 38 years, above average. 44% drier than last year, making it the number one driest in 38 years. So unusual to have this cooler trend here with the cool weather in the Midwest, the Northeast. Normally cool weather means a lot of fronts, but cold fronts, but just not getting the precip to accompany that cooler weather. TBD on how much the impact of these big fires in the Northwest are playing on our weather pattern here. Maps inset left are the trends versus average. If we look at some cool spot was actually UK at almost 10 degrees colder than last year, coldest in 8 years. So really cool there in the UK. Really hot there in India and parts of China. So again, they were India, you'd say, was really the hot spot, number 2 hottest in 38 years. If we look at how we quantify this for our big retail customers here, so let's just look at last week was 2.5 degrees cooler on a national scale, cooler in the Midwest, Northeast, even more than that. So, but the national impact on retail sales would be about 38% decline in air conditioner sales, 13% on bug spray sales, apparel down about 8%, cold beverages down about 3%. So we call this the power of 1 degree. We've quantified it thousands and tens of thousands of times for us. Point of sale data from big retail. Good news here this week. We'll talk about that here in a second here. We finally, probably going to be the peak week of summer here, going to be about 2.4 warmer than last year. Haven't said that much of this spring, summer. So that'll be a lift here in air conditioner sales, much needed. There's just massive inventory of some of these categories that just, after the coolest June in 19 years, don't want that. So that certainly had a huge influence here on the week sales. But again, some clearance opportunity here that are good for news for you. Again, a lot of these products will be on a steeper markdown. So some good news here this coming week. So we look at this week here, week ending here 29 July, the last week of July. Here in the U.S., about 2.4 warmer than last year, number 1 hottest in 38 years. Unfortunately, that heat's really there in the plains and the Midwest. Again, Southwest, not entirely where they'd want it. We'd really want to see this in the Northeast, Southeast, West Coast. But again, some upward lift here again for some of these seasonal categories that have just been stagnant here for the past couple months. Rainfall, we'll see, minus 83% drier than last year, number 1 driest in 38 years, so exceedingly dry here. Euro has definitely been much, much drier, and that's kind of the model we lean toward. It's a mix of U.S. and Euro type models, other models. But GFS U.S. model has been actually quite a little bit wetter, which has been wrong. So the leaning Euro here, again, this is probably a little bit overdone in terms of dryness. We do have to watch the tropics. Again, it's unusual here. We're already talking potentially our 5th named storm here this week. Could be Emily by Tuesday. Models right pretty much project we'll probably get at least a tropical storm name. And the track left here pretty much shows that it would go through pretty much the South Caribbean here. So it most likely track. So not expecting a hurricane here, but we'll see. But this would be the 5th, and the equatorial Pacific's only had 4. So again, unusual. El Nino would typically mean we'd have more tropical activity here, and this is a storm track here the next 14 days. But again, we did have Dom. Dom is still out there in the Atlantic. Don, just spinning around, tropical storm, been out there for almost a couple weeks now. We had Calvin pass just south of Hawaii, but again, only on potential name 4 here in the eastern Pacific. So unusual. We do have a big typhoon heading toward Taiwan as maybe a Cat 3 and then toward the Korean Peninsula. But again, not overly active in light of El Nino. So we're just not seeing the El Nino response totally yet in the atmosphere. So again, sometimes just because the oceans warm up, the weather doesn't correspond right away. If we look at next week, which is getting us into the first 5 days of August, hard to believe here, cooler trend. You can see a cold front looks like it's going to come through the Midwest Great Lakes, or it's hot week here this week. It looks like it cools down next week again for the upper Midwest Great Lakes, Northeast at least, not as hot. So again, about 1.3 cooler than last year, ninth warmest in 38 years, so above average nationally, and again, still #1 driest. We'll see if that's going to pan out here, but southeast would be the wet spot, maybe there in Colorado. Precip map versus average is inset left there. Temperature trends bottom left as well. If we just aggregate these 2-week trends here for the 23 July through 5 August period here. So generally cooler in eastern Canada, potentially getting into the northeast here eventually. We're not going to, some heat here midweek this week, and then it cools off dramatically again. So maybe a one-day of 90. We haven't had many of those this year. Still kind of cool there across the UK and Europe. Precip map versus average inset left. So with that, folks, we hope you have a great Saturday. We're having a beautiful weekend here in the east, low humidity, and we'll take it. So we'll be out and about. So have a great week, and we will talk to you next week.